To understand the devastating conflict that erupted in the Horn of Africa in 1935, we must go back nearly 40 years earlier to a battle that changed history and left a wound that never healed in the heart of a European nation. In March 1896, on the rugged hills near Adwa, the army of Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II achieved something the world believed impossible. At the height of European colonial expansion, when nearly every African territory was falling under foreign rule, Ethiopia stood alone. Italy, eager to build its own colonial empire and prove itself among Europe's great powers, invaded. Italian leaders assumed Ethiopia would collapse quickly, like so many others had. Instead, they encountered something they had not expected. Thousands of Ethiopian soldiers from different regions and kingdoms answered Menelik's call. Armed with rifles purchased from abroad, traditional weapons, extraordinary logistics, and fierce determination, they overwhelmed the invading force. The result was stunning. The Italian army was decisively defeated. The Battle of Adwa became more than a military victory. It became a global symbol. Across Africa and the Black diaspora, Ethiopia represented resistance and independence. But in Italy, Adwa became something else. Humiliation, a national trauma, one that would remain alive for generations. Fast forward to the 1930s, Italy is no longer a fragile young kingdom. Now it is ruled by fascism. At its center stands dictator Benito Mussolini. Mussolini promised Italians strength, glory, and national rebirth. He constantly invoked images of ancient Rome, the legions, conquest, and empire. His vision was ambitious. He wanted to transform Italy into a modern imperial power stretching across Africa and the Mediterranean. Italy already controlled Eritrea to Ethiopia's north and Italian Somaliland to the southeast. Between them stood one obstacle: the ancient empire of Ethiopia, one of the last independent states in Africa. Conquering Ethiopia would not only erase the humiliation of Adwa, it would demonstrate that fascist Italy had become a world power. But Mussolini needed justification. He found it in a forgotten corner of the desert. December 1934. Walwal, a remote outpost deep in disputed territory between Ethiopia and Italian Somaliland. Italian-led colonial troops and Ethiopian border forces confronted each other. Tension escalated. Then gunfire erupted. When the shooting stopped, dozens lay dead. The exact responsibility remained disputed, but Mussolini immediately used the incident as evidence of Ethiopian aggression. The decision for war had already been made. Emperor Haile Selassie understood the danger immediately. Ethiopia could not defeat Italy in an industrial war. Instead, he turned to international law. He appealed to the League of Nations, the institution created after World War I to prevent wars through collective security. Ethiopia was a member. Its sovereignty should have been protected. Selassie demanded investigation, arbitration, sanctions, action. But Europe hesitated. Britain and France feared something larger. If they confronted Mussolini too aggressively, they worried Italy might align itself with another rising dictator, Adolf Hitler. Diplomacy stalled. Meetings multiplied. Action never came. For Ethiopia, every day of delay strengthened the invasion force gathering on its borders. Then came October 3, 1935. Without a formal declaration of war, without meaningful international resistance, the invasion began. General Emilio de Bono ordered the advance. More than 100,000 Italian and colonial troops crossed into Ethiopia. Behind them came tanks, artillery, machine guns, aircraft, supply columns stretching for miles. This was not a colonial expedition. It was industrial warfare, against a country still fighting largely with 19th century infrastructure. Yet Ethiopia resisted. Men arrived from villages across the empire. Regional commanders mobilized their own forces. Nobles, farmers, cavalrymen, and volunteers gathered under the imperial banner. Some carried modern rifles, others carried spears. Many had almost no training for mechanized warfare. But they fought. At first, Italian progress was slower than expected. The mountainous terrain worked in Ethiopia's favor. Supply lines stretched. Ethiopian counterattacks repeatedly shocked Italian commanders. Mussolini became furious. Quick victory had been promised. Instead, The campaign dragged, so he escalated. He replaced De Bono with Marshal Pietro Badoglio. Badoglio received direct orders: win, at any cost. What followed became one of the darkest chapters of colonial warfare. Italian aircraft began dropping mustard gas, chemical weapons, weapons already condemned by international agreements. Bombs burst over rivers, over villages, over retreating columns, over hospitals marked with red crosses. Yellow clouds drifted through valleys. People who survived described skin blistering, eyes burning shut, lungs filling with agony. Animals died where they stood. Water sources became poisoned. Entire landscapes became weapons. Traditional Ethiopian tactics masked attacks, and close combat became impossible. Bravery could not charge through poison. Thousands died, and the world watched, mostly in silence. By early 1936, organized resistance weakened. Italian columns advanced toward Addis Ababa. Government offices evacuated. Foreign embassies prepared to leave. Emperor Haile Selassie faced an impossible decision: remain and risk capture, or leave and continue the fight abroad. He chose exile, not surrender. Exile. On May 5, 1936, Italian troops entered Addis Ababa. Days later, Mussolini announced triumphantly from Rome, "Ethiopia is Italian." Crowds celebrated. Maps were redrawn. The fascist regime declared the birth of a new empire. But beneath the ceremonies and parades, the conquest was incomplete. Weeks later, in Geneva, Haile Selassie stood before the League of Nations. One man, one defeated emperor, addressing the governments that had failed his people. His speech was calm, measured, but unforgettable. He warned that aggression ignored would not stop in Africa. He told them, "It is us today. It will be you tomorrow." Many dismissed him. History would not. Within years, Europe itself would be engulfed in war. Italian occupation never achieved peace. Cities were controlled, roads were occupied, but much of the countryside remained hostile. Resistance emerged: the Arbanok, the patriots, farmers, former soldiers, local leaders, guerrilla fighters. They launched ambushes, destroyed supply lines, refused to recognize foreign rule. The empire Mussolini claimed to have built existed mostly on paper. Then history turned again. 1940. World War II expanded across continents. Italy entered the conflict. And suddenly, Ethiopia was no longer isolated. British and Allied forces moved into East Africa. Ethiopian patriots rose simultaneously. Together, they attacked the occupation. Italian positions collapsed, one by one. By 1941, the fascist empire in East Africa was finished. Haile Selassie returned, not as a conquered ruler restored by charity, but as the symbol of a nation that had endured occupation and reclaimed itself. The Second Italo-Ethiopian War was more than a colonial conflict. It exposed the weakness of international institutions. It previewed the brutality of modern total war, and it delivered a warning the world failed to hear. A warning spoken in Geneva before Europe itself descended into catastrophe. Yet above all, it remains the story of a country that faced overwhelming force and refused to disappear.
People who see this throughout the world will realize that even in the 20th century, with faith, courage, and a just cause, David will still beat Goliath.